You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christie Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how? Hello, welcome to the show. Today I am re-airing my original conversation with Lindsay Fleming. Lindsay is a therapist specializing in children, teens, and young adults with a focus on anxiety and ADHD. In addition to being a therapist, Lindsay is a mental health advocate with a research-based presence on TikTok. Her account has over 500,000 followers and over 15 million likes. On this episode, we discuss the double-edged sword of social media, particularly when it comes to mental health. On one hand, you have amazing resources and information being shared to so many people who might not hear it otherwise. And on the other hand, you have some misinformation and some questionable ethics around what is being shared. This is one of the conversations that sparked my interest in where the podcast is going next. There's more information to come in the next week or so about the new, but still very aligned focus of my show. In the meantime, and while I continue to scramble all the details and talk the perfectionist in me off the ledge about all the new fun things going on the show in the coming weeks, let's hear from Lindsay on her experience as a therapist on TikTok, social media and the youth, and so much more. Here's Lindsay. Hey, Lindsay. So nice to meet you. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you know how it is. You see someone on social media for so long, and then there's like, "Whoa, you're here." She's real.
It becomes weird when it's usually a one-way conversation, and now it's both ways.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for being here. I usually start by just getting to know a little bit about you and why you decided to become a therapist in the first place.
So when I was younger, like many therapists, right, we all have some connection to mental health. I really struggled to kind of fit in. Like I had friends, but there was some bullying going on at school, a lot of mental health history in my family. And I went to a few therapists for myself, and I just did not find it helpful. And I was like, there has to be something we can do to help people feel like me. There's no way I'm the only one feeling this. So as I was deciding my career paths, I learned about, obviously asked about and learned about therapy. And I was like, I want to be a therapist. And like many people, you know, when you are perfectionist and you're driven by achievement, I put my blinders on. I was like, I'm going to become a therapist. I'm going to become a therapist. And then I got to grad school and I had this little aha moment like, oh my goodness, am I going to like this? I really hope I like this. And then I got my first client and I was like, yep, this is where I'm meant to be. This is exactly what I want to do with my life.
Okay. And going back, can you identify what about your experience in therapy as a kid was not working for you?
The therapist, so I saw a couple therapists, and the first therapist, she's very much like these irrational fears I was having. She's like, it's possible it could happen, but it's not probable. And in my little elementary school brain, I was like, I know that, yet I'm scared, you know? Right. So I just didn't find her one approach. She wasn't really switching up her approach, was just not helpful for me. And now as a
Okay.
therapist, I understand what the second therapist was doing, but at the time I just like didn't find it helpful. And I guess too, a lot of us don't know, like you can use your voice in therapy and be like, can we try something else? And I had no idea, and I was
Hmm.
such a people pleaser that I was just like, okay, that's helpful. I think it was a mix
Yeah.
of my anxiety of not wanting to let people know things weren't working, um, and people just utilizing the same approach that wasn't working for me.
Yeah. So you were in therapy, it sounds like for anxiety. Were there other things going on that
It
brought
was
you to that?
mostly generalized anxiety disorder. I was diagnosed with a learning disability in kindergarten, so that school was always more difficult for me. Um, but we didn't
Mm.
really touch on that in therapy, which I think we should have probably. And then I diagnosed with
Right.
ADHD while I was in grad school, so that came later, but also filled in a lot of
Okay.
blanks growing up.
Yeah. And now, you know, doing what you do, what would you have done differently if you were your own therapist back in the
No
day?
one's asked me that question. That's a good question. I think I would have taken a lot. I think sometimes in therapy, we're so set on like, okay, here's the problem, here's the solution. And I think I
Hmm.
would have slowed it down and just understood what it felt like more to be me. And then really utilizing
Mm.
those exposure therapy is like one of my favorites. So utilizing exposure therapy probably would have been my framework I would have went down.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like you said elementary school. So, yes, on one hand, I totally hear you and I agree that there aren't many people that know you can be vocal about what you want or asking for things, but honestly, how much could we expect someone in elementary school to say or do in that situation? I mean, it's a little intimidating as it is. So, it is kind of the onus on the
Yes, yeah.
professional.
And that's why I always check in with my clients. And especially being on social media, there's a lot of boundary work around that. But we have to talk about how, because I have this platform, I never want a young client to be like, oh, but she helps all these people online. So what she's saying has to help me. Otherwise, it's my problem. Like I'm the problem. Or Taylor
Mm,
Swift, I'm the problem. It's me. So I try to make sure I check in and say, like, there's a lot of tools in the toolbox. It's really about me asking them and getting them in a place where also I think it's therapeutic for them to practice advocating for themselves.
yeah.
So I try that space, try to provide the framework, and it
Mhm.
creates a space they do feel comfortable doing that in.
Yeah, because you are now working like mostly or entirely with children, tweens, and teens,
So
or
yeah,
what's the age group?
yeah, some of my clients they don't want to leave me. I'm like, fly, bird.
Oh,
College age students, and so some young adults, some teens, and then some elementary school. So I'd say my age range is pretty wide, but my treatment is very much focused on anxiety, ADHD, and opposition, like behavioral issues.
okay. And so you said that you were diagnosed with ADHD at 23 in grad school. Um, what what led to that? Like, what did you like? What was going on for you that you're like, huh, something's going on here? Like, how did that go?
So I was in therapy again because I had gone in elementary school and middle school, and I went to like a high school counselor at our school. And then I went to college and I had a really solid friend group. So I was feeling better. But I got to grad school and I just put so much pressure on myself. So I went back to therapy. I was also like, how can I sit there and ask someone to be vulnerable with me if I don't know what it feels like to be on the other side of that chair?
Mhm.
So I went to therapy as an adult. And it's so funny because like what you're talking about, how it's really on the professional. I was like, I'm gonna be a therapist. Like I'm going in, I'm open. I'm telling them I'm an open book. Killing me. I'm an open book. I'm going to tell them everything. And I sat down in that chair and she was like, why are you here? I'm like, oh no, good question. No idea. It was so hard to be vulnerable. So it was a good reminder too. Like sometimes when you talk about therapy, when you're on one side of the chair, it's really easy to forget how hard it is. But so I was seeing Debbie, shout out Debbie, my therapist. And at the same time, I was in graduate school and we were in our diagnosing class. It was actually my best friend Mariana from grad school was like, Lindsay, this definition is you. And I was like, no, stop. Like, we could probably say that about everyone for everything, you know?
Yeah.
And like, no, 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 no. And so we had to do partnered assessment. She's like, let me do an ADHD assessment and actually like you answer honestly, like not as a pretend client. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay. So we did it. And it was like very much I was fitting the criteria. Obviously, I'm not going to take my graduate student best friend and be like, I have ADHD. But
Right.
then I talked to my therapist about it, and she was like, I've also been seeing some traits of that. So she referred me for a full neuropsych evaluation. I got an evaluation, and they were like, you definitely have ADHD. But I can, and I understand with women, it's a lot less likely we're going to get diagnosed. And having the learning disability, they kind of thought anytime I wasn't focused or like my work was messy or things like that, they just attributed it to that. So I
Mhm.
think that made it a little bit harder too for them to catch it.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what
Mhm.
was the learning disability that you were diagnosed with?
Yeah. So we say dyslexia, right? Or dysgraphia
Okay.
is math, or for writing. And what I would say is like dyslexia is kind of the term we all utilize, but in like diagnosing terminology, they call it like a learning disability, and it can be specific in reading, writing, or math.
Okay.
Um, so mine was in reading, specifically in reading and writing, but more so you saw the impact in reading. And it's funny, like even today I will forget because I've lived with it my whole life and I've learned to manage it. But I'll be trying to spell things, and my husband, I'll be like, "How do you spell this?" And he's like, "Come on, you're kidding." I'm like, "I am not kidding." And
Yeah.
now I learned to not even question it. He's just like telling me how to spell things, but it's just like so it's specifically in reading, which just means that my brain works a little differently. And actually, like 1 in 5 students have dyslexia, but we don't screen for it. So you have to someone has to advocate for you to get tested at school. And if a parent asks for testing at school, the school has like I think it's 40 or 60, I don't know for sure, school days to actually follow through on that testing.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to get. I'm very fortunate that I grew up in a school that had the resources and came to my mom and was like, you need to get her tested. So my mom had friends in the city because she worked in the city where that was not their experience. And they were pretty much shamed, like told they had to fight for it. They had to get lawyers involved and told, like, are you sure you want this on your kid's college application? Which it
Wow.
doesn't college application. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
and if there's anything I've learned through going through a process from my preschooler who has an IEP now, it's like, if any, at first, yeah, it was a little, a little scary, unknown of what we're getting into. But at the end of the day, I have a room full of professionals analyzing exactly what my kid needs, not a classroom full of kids, not a generation of kids, my kid. And that's pretty epic,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah. Very much. And like I love we've come so far, and I love how they include kids in those conversations once they get to high school. Um, and I just wish that somebody would have explained to me why I had these resources and how my
Yeah.
brain because I was assuming that I was just dumb, and like that's obviously not the
Yeah.
case. But IEPs, I'm good for you that you have an IEP at that young of an age, because it is hard sometimes for parents to get those.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, I didn't even know what it was until I had to know what it was. And it's like, I don't actually think that we need to educate everyone on everything all the time, but like, it would have been nice if I just even had an awareness of what an IEP was before someone's looking at me with my 2.5-year-old going, she's in the special needs class. And I'm like, excuse me? But really, it's like, what do they call it? They call it disabled preschool. And like, it's just it's terrible. Like, she's not disabled. She just has to go to speech therapy. Like, that's it. Like, it's just wild. I wish,
Which
yeah,
we
like, yeah, like, just at least had some point of reference before I'm like going down a horrible Google rabbit hole.
I think like you're saying, a lot of parents, right, then they go to Google for their information, or I find parents don't even know that they have a right to request an IEP, an
Yeah.
evaluation or what the difference is between a 504 and an IEP.
Yeah.
And I had one and my brother also had a 504 plan, and they were like, he's not really using his services. So she's like, okay, we can get rid of it. She's like, I wish I never would have done that because he was younger. And
Mm,
then when you get to high school, where maybe some of these behaviors or the accommodations could have come in hand, you have to restart that whole process of
mm,
requesting already deemed that child of not needing it anymore. It's really hard to get back.
yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, especially as having an older child, that being particularly difficult because our recommendation referral came right from the pediatrician.
And that's the
And yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
And that's the younger they are that they get these services, the better it is. So
yeah,
that's have those supports put in place.
yeah. All right. So I obviously know of you because of social media, and you've mentioned it a few times. Um, I think, you know, obviously I could ask you a bunch of things about social media, but I think I want to start with the sort of what I see as the blessing and the curse of mental health having this huge moment on social media. Um, it's it's a blessing in that here we are, people who don't have access can, get some help, but even just taking like ADHD, the amount of TikToks I've seen where I'm like, do I have ADHD?
You'll really post about anymore about like these are signs you have. I try not to post those videos actually as much unless
Yeah.
it's specific of describing like this is something that can help, because I do see that happening where in reality, like I think people don't understand what a diagnosis is.
Mm,
And people, like when people come out like that's your childhood trauma, I really struggle with those videos. And there's been even okay, now I'm like getting scattered because I could go this gets me very going. Um, so let me start with this. There's a lot of misinformation on social media, and there's a lot of people in the field who are like, yes, be on social media. And there's also a lot of people in the field who are like, that's not our place to be discussing. My thought process is people are out there talking about it. We might as well have someone who's licensed and knows what they're talking about in the mix.
mhm,
Um, but there's a huge ADHD creator who posted a video. He has no real credentials that I could find, that I could see. And his video said, you know, ADHD can be inattentive. So that's difficult, like you're distracted by your thoughts. Impulsive and hyperactive is another type, which is very true, where that's more of like body movement, hard for you to sit still. And then the combined type, which means like where you're seeing both. So they changed the word type to presentation. So it's saying that you present just like language, we're always changing language in the mental health field.
right.
So he came out with a video saying that you actually have all three of the ADHDs. What your diagnosis is what you have at the time of getting your evaluation, which is incorrect. That is not true.
Okay.
So then people are in the comments being like, wait, my doctor said I have ADHD inattentive presentation only. And then he's commenting, you should get a new doctor, your therapist, they don't know what talking about. And I'm here like, no, you don't know what you're talking about.
Wow.
So sometimes it's hard, but for me to like not step in and like fact check people. But I've talked to my friends on social media, like that, my therapist friends on social media, and they were like, we've had good discussions. We're like, we're not the gatekeepers of mental health. And all we
Right.
can do is like, try to put out really good content. If something's really, really like off, like make sure we speak on it and just advocate and share how to know if information is reliable or not.
Mhm.
But so that's like one piece of thing. There's a lot of misinformation, or like this is stemming from your childhood trauma. And I think some of those videos where it's like very true, it could be. It also could be a variety of other things. So when we say that this is why this is happening, I think we're kind of misleading sometimes. Videos can be misleading. So that's my thing about like misinformation. The other piece about diagnosing is we all experience these behaviors as humans. And a diagnosis is when it's impacting your functioning. And even in diagnoses, there's a range. So to be diagnosed with anxiety disorder, for example, or depression, the symptoms have to be there for 6 months, right? For more days than not, to have an anxiety disorder. So it's like this isn't a moment of anxiety. This is something, and there's all these criteria you have to meet, that it's been impacting you over time. And I think people don't realize that. Like, we all feel anxious at times. We all get distracted at times, especially the way our world is set up. More people are struggling to focus and pay attention. So I see why people are gravitating towards connecting with the things we talk about with ADHD. But in order to have an ADHD diagnosis, this is the way someone's brain developed. This is how this ADHD has to be present in childhood. So symptoms have to be there before 12. So there's a lot of stuff that I think people just aren't aware of when it comes to the diagnosing process and how to know if somebody actually meets that criteria.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even just right there saying that ADHD has to be present in childhood, like I wouldn't have known that, and now I can full on dismiss any any thought of, do I have ADHD? No, I think I just have like overwhelmed burnout brain. Like I think that's what I have, because there are times where seeing videos that say like this is sign, this is sign, this is, it's like this is also a sign of just like being a toddler parent. Like I
Yeah,
don't know.
kind of like your life is busy,
Yeah.
and sign of human behavior. We have so many more things now that are pulling our attention and addictive, that people get like, people fall into procrastination because it's so much easier to pull up your phone. Before, it'd be like you can
Yeah.
play Snake on your phone and that's the distraction, right? I could send like 15 texts a week and that was like what all I was allowed on my phone plan. So it's like, before we didn't have ways to distract ourselves as easily. Now it's like our phone lights up and it's so easy to do that. And then it's like, wow, I really struggle to focus. I must have ADHD. When it's like, it might be our habits and how culturally we've shifted of how we communicate and operate.
Yeah. 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 And the phrase that's coming to mind, a lot of the videos are like, oh, this is a trauma response. It's like I I mean, apparently a lot of the things I do are a trauma response. And it's like it starts to mess with you a little. And I think because of what I do, right? I interview therapists and coaches and mental health experts, that is mainly what my entire pick any social media platform, that's who is on my pages, whether it's
Yeah.
intentional or because the algorithm is like, oh, here's this. And so it's like every time I open an app, it's like, here's my next trauma response, here's my next like
Yeah.
diagnosis. It's like a little much. I have to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Trauma, we can all experience traumatic events, and that doesn't even necessarily mean we have trauma. So it's like, again, I think there's just such a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And when we refer to everything as trauma, we start to, the people who have really struggled, it starts to like kind of lose the, like, at least from what my clients have told me, the impact. So I can speak of like what people have shared with me of the impact they feel like it's had of everything being called trauma.
Mhm.
They feel a little invalidating then when you do have a traumatic experience, of how to know how to label that.
Yeah.
So I, like, knowledge is power. I wish that people could get this information in a way that's more vetted and structured.
Mhm.
uh, that's why I don't know if you watched the Selena Gomez documentary,
I
but
did. Yeah.
I loved that she talked about, really, and this is what I most mental health professionals feel too. It's not new to the field, but love that she's advocating for it, because she's such a person of um, that can have, that has those connections and power to really voice this, of having a class about emotional health
Yeah.
and really like teaching people. And that, I think, too, helps us catch behaviors so much younger. People can understand how to verbalize what they're feeling. But we are in a crisis, a mental health pandemic, crisis, whatever you want to phrase it as. But I believe diagnosing and medicating and therapy, there's a shortage of therapists. Putting everyone on, those are not, that's not the answer to this crisis. On the spectrum of mental health needs, are there people who absolutely need medication? Yes, I'm one of those people. Like, changed my life, and need those diagnoses. Yes, but on the scale too, it's like there's a lot of environmental things and other things that we could be teaching and doing that people wouldn't need to be on that other side of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right. Um, I think that it really needs to start younger because, you know, I don't know. I just speaking from my own experience, just having had a pretty like solid life, like nothing that would be, I think, generally considered like a big T kind of trauma.
Mhm.
But that it, I think it that it's hard because while I feel grateful for that, I also don't know how prepared I was for things in adulthood, right?
Yeah.
Like I didn't never really had to deal deeply with something. And it's weird because you don't the end of that sentence is like it's not that I wish I had to as a kid. It's just in a way that where it's being taught in a classroom rather than taught as a response to a trauma might have might
Yeah.
have just got the wheels turning a little bit earlier,
Yeah. Yeah. All about promotion and prevention work, right? We work in a system that is so much about reaction and that relies on the
Yes.
individual to reach out and find help. And how do we haven't even taught people how to identify when they need help? So how can they do that? I think about like just like what you're saying, people who might not need mental health support, but the stuff I'm teaching in session, sometimes I'm like, this is general. Like I could
Yeah.
teach this to everyone and they can benefit from it. But I think it gives us the language and the practice to understand like it's okay and to hear other people's lived experiences of like, oh, wow, people struggle and it's okay if I have to ask for help, and giving us that language helps when we're later in our life and we're noticing how you're feeling and you can remember those skill sets that you were taught and know when and how to ask for help.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that this, word that was coming to mind as you're talking is just, you can teach mindfulness at any age. You can teach even self-care at any age, right?
Yes.
Like a 3-year-old can figure out like, hey, self-care right now would be to like sit down and chill
Yes.
for a minute. You know what I mean? Like a
Exactly.
3-year-old can understand that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so the other piece of this is like only 1% of research that is done in the psychological field makes it to the public. So
Mm,
it's like we have all this research, we know what people need. And one prime example of this is we know anxiety rates skyrocket for girls in middle school.
mhm.
We know that depression rates start to go up for boys freshman year of high school. So if we know what's happening
Right.
when, and we can pretty much we have theories on the why, how come we aren't going in and helping that? And even if someone comes to my office for insurance to pay for their session, they have to have a diagnosis,
Wow. Yeah.
have to be suffering enough for me to diagnose you as something for insurance companies to pay for your therapy.
Wow.
Wouldn't you? And even let's go from a money aspect of insurance companies. Wouldn't it make more sense for someone to come in for me for a few sessions when they don't have a diagnosis than wait for them to be struggling where they're not going to school, refusing to do these things? Now they're going to be in therapy a lot longer, they're suffering way more, and you're paying for that too. So it's like, to me, it does not make sense on why we have to wait for someone to truly be struggling to the point that they meet criteria for a diagnosis to get help.
Patriarchy.
Exactly.
I mean, capitalism. It's
Yeah,
just all
find
those
it.
big
Yeah.
horrible words that mean a lot of things, but
Yeah.
it's not
Not
our
people treatment.
not
That
people first, right? Our system is not actually designed to best benefit
yes, the
the,
people.
the people. It's not. And that's a whole other podcast,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah,
Because if you have the money, you can pay out of pocket for therapy, but
right.
families don't. So
Right. Right. Okay. So let's do that a little bit. The anxiety with middle
yeah.
school girls. I know you work a lot with this age group of girls. You are I saw you do a cheerleading coach. Like you just are yeah, it's all about like I feel like you're like the middle school girl whisperer and I I
Middle
would
school-
love what's that?
I love middle school girls. I feel like nobody else but me can say that.
Yeah. Okay. So what talk to me a little bit about maybe go one way or the other, go both ways. What's the anxiety piece for these girls? And if you wouldn't mind like just taking what you just said, like, I feel like I'm the only one who likes middle school girls. It's like, what are we missing about middle school girls? What are we not getting about them?
Oh my gosh, they're the best. So this is what I can say. When I first got home from college, from undergrad, and I had a summer to go to before I went to grad school. Of course, I'm like, I got to find a million things to sign up for and then overwhelm myself because I overextended myself. So I
Naturally.
offered to coach, I reached out to my old competitive cheer coach because I had no friends really at the time, and cheerleading was a space I could go to. I felt accepted, which is so funny because cheerleading it's like such a bad rap, and I
Yeah.
like my team, and so it was a place I felt included and seen. So I was like, I want to give back a little. So I reached out to my old coach who was still running the program, and she was like, "Yes, come coach. How long do I have you for?" I'm like, "I'm actually living at home while I go to grad school." She's like, "Perfect. I'm going to give you an entire team." I'm like, "Never coached before," but of course I'm like, "Sure." So I had a team of fifth graders. I think we started with fifth, maybe sixth graders, and they followed me through. In their last year, it was my last year coaching,
Oh.
but so they're middle schoolers and they had no confidence. And I make them all sit in a circle and stand up and say something they're proud of. And it was like pulling teeth. So I decided to create a leadership workshop, and I really got to hear their experience of what it's like to be a middle school girl these days. And they shared with me like anxieties around achievement, anxieties around peers, the idea like that they can't miss one thing because if I miss that one thing that everybody's going to, then they're going to make plans for something else and I'm not going to be included in that. If I'm not included in that, then I'm going to lose all my friends. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I would hope if you're not go to one thing, your friends are going to drop you. So there's a lot of friend groups. There's a lot of differences in maturity levels. There's a lot of differences in interests. Now, some people are getting into like romantic feelings, others aren't there yet. So, start to see just differing and changing of friendships. The girls would tell me how, like, I said, what if I asked you to walk in the hall by yourself? Oh my gosh, you can't be on your phone, can't be listening to music. Like, that is the worst thing you could ever do to me. I'm like, oh my goodness, the thought of walking in the hallway by yourself gives you so much anxiety. They're like, I could never. I figured out that they don't realize how much they're on their phones. And when I approached it from, I'm going to buy all of you guys Starbucks if you're going to make your own social media goals. And I'm going to buy you all Starbucks if you reach them. So we wrote all of our goals on my whiteboard, and their reactions were so funny. And I was laughing with them. I wasn't like lecturing them. I was just in there with them, and I'm like, I don't even want to show you guys my time. And one of the girls is laughing. At the time, I did not have TikTok, and she saw how much she used TikTok, she deleted the entire app for the week. So it's like if you can meet them where they're at and they can trust you and they feel comfortable, we had so much fun. And one of the girls said to me one day, she's like, Lindsay, it's so funny. Like you act like a kid with us. And I was like, do I though? Because I feel like I don't. And she said this after we were walking to Starbucks and I let them like walk a half a block ahead of me. And she's like,
Yeah.
you didn't yell at us to make sure we wait at the corner. I'm like, well, you're middle schoolers. I hope you would know to wait at the corner. But adults are so anxious and they're like always redirecting middle schoolers. And so I was like, I don't think it's that I'm a kid. I was like, I feel like it's because I treat you guys like I give them a lot of control. And she was like, you're right. And what the workshop was the first 45 minutes we talked about the topics they wanted to talk about, and the second 45 minutes I had them create their own philanthropy project. So I was like, this is you guys. They wanted to sell chocolates. They had to email the lady. I went and picked them up. They wanted to sell chocolates for like a fundraiser. Then we bought Starbucks gift cards and went around our uptown area and handed them out to people as like an act of kindness. And they loved it. And it was their project. And right before COVID hit, we were doing one where they were making for a dog shelter. They were making they wanted to make little like cards so the dogs could get adopted. And they were so excited about it. And what I realized is like, they had no problem solving abilities. Everyone's telling them what to do. No one's like, what do you think you should do? So I noticed like they have no confidence in how they look and feel and their abilities to do things in life. And so I tried to provide them that space and watch their confidence flourish. But I think it's really hard when you move from elementary school where you care about your parents' opinions and adults to middle school where now you're caring more about your peers' parents, and you don't really know how to navigate that. or how to push away from the family values and figure out your own values. And so I really tried to provide them the space to talk about it within each other. And that's actually when they had said, when they meet their social media goal, they're like, we don't want you to buy a Starbucks. We want you to download TikTok. And I said, absolutely not. And then the pandemic hit. I had to cancel the groups, and a bunch of the girls reached out that they were missing me, missing the group. And so then I was like, I'm going to download TikTok just to surprise
Oh
them.
my God.
5 videos are this is for middle school girls. Five tips to build your confidence.
Wow.
They still come back to me and they're like, I still do the deep breathing when I can't fall asleep at night. I still do this when this happens. So I think it's just like sometimes we also don't realize just believing in middle schoolers and not being like, oh, you're in middle school, oh, like kind of acting like they don't know what they're
Yeah.
doing, and really giving them the space to make them feel like they're in control and they're an adult. You can see the impact,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I am, first of all, that's kind of hysterical that that was what prompted you to download TikTok, and now you are like the face of therapy on TikTok.
And they are so funny. Like, they were reaching out to me when I first started blowing up. They're like, "You're blowing up." I'm like, and then um, I think one of the girls, I said something like, I think, you go through these dull periods where I wasn't getting as many views. And I was talking to one of the girls and I was like, yeah, I don't know if it's like, maybe I need to switch up what I'm talking about. Like, maybe it's not resonating like with people. And she's like, Lindsay, stop. Like this. And I'm like laughing because I'm like, these are the skills I taught you. Now you're throwing back in my face. She's like, even if you help one person, how crazy is that? I'm like, okay. And I like use a lot of sarcasm and humor with them. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You feel like when you post and they're like, okay, fine. So then we had a good discussion though about how we can get caught up in like likes and comments, and me being vulnerable with them and sharing and being a human, I think help them also be able to share and be vulnerable. But yeah, that it is interesting to like start to peek into their world a little bit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I've heard two, and I'm wondering if there are others, but you mentioned, um, empowering them to make decisions, and giving them that space, using sarcasm, humor. Are there other sort of keys to unlock the middle school girl
Yeah,
code?
know what's going on in their world. They get so impressed if I know who they're talking about.
You
They
mean in their personal lives, or like knowing who a TikTok star person
Yeah,
is?
TikTok star is who, like, if I take the time to get to know the things that they enjoy, like they'll be like, oh, I love this singer, and I won't say anything, and I'll come back the next day, listen to that song you were talking about, it's really good, I like this lyric. And they're like, you actually listen to it? I'm like, of course. So
Mm,
it's then they're like, oh wow, like they get that sense of pride of
mhm.
so connection is key to everything. I think with parents too, it's really hard with parenting a middle schooler. I want to say I get it, but I don't fully get it because I don't have kids. But I am with them enough to know that it can be really difficult, especially dealing with a kid who's struggling. My biggest piece of advice is you have to find ways to connect.
Yeah.
And the relationship is the foundation. You get more out of kids. I get more out of kids when I'm playing games than I do when I'm asking them direct questions. I get more out of kids when they're talking about a show and I ask them, who do you relate to on that show and why? So
Mm,
it's and even my mom tells me, she's like, anytime I asked you to go for a walk, you were like, bleh, word vomiting everything that was going on in your grade. So it's like you can find ways to connect with your kid. Um, Things can go a lot better
mhm.
in the sense of like your frustration tolerance too, because it's hard when you feel like a kid is just poking at you all the time to then regulate yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was in that age, my mom used to take me on long car rides.
Yeah, yeah. See, they'll find you got to just pay attention to when your kid tends to open up more and try to find ways to get them in that environment.
Yeah. My kids are little. They're almost 5 and 3,
Mhm.
but I have nieces and a nephew who are, um, you know, tweens, teens, and they're so intimidating, man. Like, I am so intimidated by them. I just I don't At one point my husband had to say to me, this is like years ago, he's like, "Listen, you're trying too hard to be their friend. Like you're their aunt. Like it's okay.
That is also true. I do forget. Like for me, I think my strength as a therapist is like connecting with people. So it's like I do forget, but that is so true. Like they can smell it if you are like
Yep.
trying to be their friend really hard. Like that's so funny.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think um particularly with my niece and nephew, like they were the first time that I was ever faced with my actual age and like how not cool I was anymore.
I
So it was
know.
like a little bit jarring at first. I was like, wait a minute. Especially since I'm the youngest of the aunts and uncles, I always was like, oh, like I
I'm the
got this. Yeah, I'm the cool one. Don't worry about it. And they were like, oh, honey, you are not.
That's so funny. Oh yeah. No, no. I know. And their looks that they give and they like to just like
They're
sit
just
on.
like grunt at you. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
But the phone thing was interesting. I recently had um long story short, my niece, who is 13, had said something about like the adults were talking about how we want like nothing more than like a Netflix day to just like do nothing, right? And she's like, don't you feel bad about just like watching TV all day, that like, you've wasted your day? And I looked at it, I was like, coming from the girl who scrolls TikTok for 12 hours a day, and you know what she said? She looked at me, she goes, yeah, but I don't feel good about it. And I was like, oh, I'm like, well, why do you do it then? She's like, I'm just bored. I have nothing else to do. And, I sent her like a box of stuff,
Yeah.
like different
Yeah.
kits and things. And I don't know if she's just like an older 13-year-old, she's a city girl, but
Hmm.
like I asked her, I was like, so did anything? Like, did you like anything? And
Yeah.
she's like, "Mm,
Mm.
like, I don't really do art anymore. I don't really, and I'm like, what do you do? She's like, I don't know. I'm like,
Yeah. No, they pick the phone because it's immediate gratification and their brains are impulsive.
mm,
And so they always are going to pick the phone because it's what everyone's doing and that's what is enjoyable for them in the moment, and then it creates that long-term anxiety. And um that's the biggest piece I think I encourage my clients is to find hobbies and find things to do, because what I realize is a lot of teens are doing things to get into college. And it's not, I want to do this.
mhm,
And parents, I'll be like, so the first things I recommend, if it's a teenager who's depressed or anxious and they're not really involved in much, we got to get involved in something. I want them to get a job and I want them to volunteer somewhere. I don't care where, I don't care what it is. And the point of that is it's like we have to be doing things, connecting with people and in other spaces, and otherwise we just doom scroll, right? And parents will be like, oh my gosh, that's such a good idea for their college application. And
mm,
I'm like, this isn't for their college application, this is for them to
yeah,
feel good about
yeah,
themselves. This is for them to learn skills and to be a part of society. So I think like also there's just such a pressure to succeed, and parents feel the pressure too because you want to set your kid up the best you can, but it turns into then kids just being frozen, or they're just doing things to check the box, not, oh, this makes me feel good, or I'm interested in this, or I want to do this. It's like, oh, this will look good on my resume.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel that mostly because of how I was raised,
Yeah.
it was like even my school was like more or less we're going to like go volunteer at this food kitchen so you can all put something on your applications, and
Yeah.
it was a Catholic school, so it was service oriented to begin with, but like
Yeah.
it wasn't hidden. It was like come application time, make sure you put the food bank on because we did it, you know. Um,
And that
but
doesn't
yeah,
people to help each other,
right.
what am I think that's the foundation of what am I going to get out of this,
Yeah,
but what get out of this and how's this
yeah,
going to be, and that's the opposite of the point of volunteering.
right.
So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I've just as an aunt have had to kind of get over with this is like I also think that, and I can imagine it being similar for parents. It's like I think we also have this hope that we're going to have this like Gilmore Girls moment with our
Yeah.
teen after we connect. Like it might not look great. Like might still get an eye roll or a grunt, but I
Yeah.
don't know how that conversation is going on to impact my niece or nephew a few days from now, or you know um
Their face for the how the conversation went for sure.
and
Because
but that's what's scary.
they feel awkward. Like
Yeah.
they feel so awkward in their own skin, or they, when we don't feel confident, if we can make other people feel not confident, it makes us feel good, right? And so I just think teens are just so misunderstood, and they have so many ideas and potential, but we box them into these boxes of, and I think what you said is such a perfect example of, oh, they're teenagers and this is what they want to do.
Yeah.
Like this teenager sitting here scrolling and saying, I feel guilty and it doesn't make me feel good. It's like, we don't realize that they have these thoughts and that they don't want to feel like that. It's like, oh, they're choosing to do that.
Yeah.
Um, like, no, we set up a world where that's what they do. We've
Mm,
created these platforms with no end of scrolling and these spaces where it's like everybody wants to be an influencer, but I can tell you firsthand, it's not all it's cracked up to be. So
yeah.
it's, I think too, it's idealizing. You're not competing just against the people in your class anymore. You're competing against places where 18-year-olds can have millions of followers and be making all this money. But
Mm,
what does it mean for their mental health?
yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is something that I've talked about a bit on the show too, is the idea of mental health and content creation. I feel like it's a whole thing.
How many content creators do you see like needing to take a break or take a step or need posting every day because they feel like if they don't post, they're going to become irrelevant or like something's going to happen? So um it's like you're always as relevant, you're only as relevant as your last video. And so it's like the way that viewers want to feel the content is that it's genuine and you're just posting to post, but then that's not really how the platforms operate, right? So
No.
there's a lot of like missing pieces of creation content, and I think like viewers, and there's a lot of pressure, I feel, on content creators. And then you're supposed to be grateful, so you're not allowed to struggle,
Right.
because other people have it worse, or other people, this
Right.
comparison, which I hate, and comparison trauma can be so bad and not helpful. We see it a lot with content creation. Like, you're not, I can be as mean to you as I want because you chose to put yourself on the internet and you chose to do this. But it's like, why choose to be mean to another human being?
Right. Right. I think there's still, even though, content creation is, like you just said, there's thousands of people who make a very good living on it. Like there are a lot of people that where it is a job and it is a living. I think the viewers still want it to feel like this just like lucky thing that happened. And there's still such a at this point, I feel like people have to know, but like it's so much work. It's
Yeah,
so much work, and either people are still choosing to believe that it's easy,
yeah,
or they just don't care because, for every video that you see of a TikToker who's happens to be like sitting in their car, just like
yeah,
grabbed a coffee and this, it's
yeah,
like that was planned, dude.
yeah.
That was planned.
Five,
Okay.
that took
What? I missed what you said. What?
that took 5 takes. It took like
Yes.
editing. And I think also what's interesting is people are like, we want more. So I don't post as much because like a lot of stuff I work outside has gotten busy at like my practice and things. And people are like, we miss you, we want you to post. But it's like, I mean, with me it's different because I'm a therapist, so I'm even more about like, I wouldn't, with brand deals and different things like that. But it's interesting, it's like you want creators to post all the time, but then as soon as they leave their job and have to make a living by doing these other ways, people get annoyed with the
Right.
brand or these things. And it's like, oh, we can't have it both ways. It is a lot of work. um and it also comes with a lot of privilege, like a lot of things, right? So I don't know, I think it's like people are just struggling and taking it out on each other, and it's like you're not allowed to struggle because your struggle isn't as bad, I'll put in air quotes, as mine.
Right. Right.
Um, we're all human. We all have feelings. So,
Yeah. Has anything about, kind of kicking off your platform and
mhm.
to where it is now, has anything about it really taken you by surprise?
Oh yeah, I'd say a lot has taken me by surprise. One, I did not realize how many people like want to hear about mental health.
Yeah.
Has been one thing. It's been interesting now when I'm in public, like talking to people I haven't seen in a while or like friends of friends. And like I kid you not, and I love talking about mental health, so I'll talk about it all day, but everybody has someone close to them or share something with me. And I'm like so grateful that I get to be that space for people. But sometimes I'm like, I just want to have a beer and be out. I don't want
Yeah.
to like talk about
Yeah.
mental health. But a lot of times I'm like, you just see how much mental health has touched so many people. And I think it's opened the door, people in my life seeing me be so vulnerable about it or talk about it, to where they're asking me a lot of questions and sharing a lot with me. Um, the other piece that surprised me is like, I used to be obsessed with everybody liking me. Like I had to make sure everybody liked me. And I will say being on social media is the number one reason why I'm not there anymore.
Mm.
You can't survive in social media and be a people pleaser.
Mhm.
Um, I even had one experience where this was a while ago. I had a video. This was when it was trending of people like changing words on
Mm.
videos, and they changed my words to make it look like I was telling people to unalive themselves.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and it got 5 million views. And I had reached out to TikTok and asked them to like take it down, right? I reported it. I had two my therapist friends reported it. I reached out to TikTok to take it down, and they said that they found no community violations.
Oh, great.
So that was really frustrating. And I obviously very upsetting. You go to the comments and then it's like, well, if a therapist told me to do it, and people are like, well, do it. And like, it's just horrible things, very triggering. And so I was like really upset. And I'll never forget my husband, now he was my boyfriend at the time, was like, he's like, you just, I don't, I'm like, I need to put my phone down, and I don't know if I want to acknowledge it or what I want to, how I want to manage it. I don't want to, I always tell my clients 48-hour rule, wait 48 hours if you have big emotions before you do anything. And so I'm like, I just need to put my phone away. I need to go for a walk. I need to watch The Office. I need to, like play cards. Like I just need to do these things that help me feel better. And Danny was like, it's fine. Just like, why are you so like, you just need to like stop, and you need to just practice what you preach and not care what people think. And I'm like, no, I am practicing what I preach. I need to feel my feelings and
Right.
take a space from it, decide what I want to do in a clear head, and then do that. And he was like, oh, I'm like, I have to, you can't just push it away.
Come on,
Which is,
honey.
oh, I know you hear me talk about this all the time. Like, come on. So, that's what I did. I just like took a break for like 2 days, and then the same kind of thing happened to someone else. So I just came out and was like, hey guys, let's be thoughtful about what we're posting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's forced me out of my comfort zone in a lot of different ways for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, well, and there's no guidebook, right?
No,
There's no employee handbook
no.
for being a TikTok star or an influencer or just a content creator. There's
Yeah.
no set way to do things. And I think part of that is because the line does get so blurred between, business and personal. It's
Hmm.
like you go to work, it's very clear where the line is. When work is in your bedroom or in your home office or, sharing
On
your
your
quote
phone that
unquote,
you're
right,
on.
like, I was gonna say sharing your quote unquote spontaneous trip to the grocery store. It's like, you
Exactly.
know,
It's been
um,
out for a week. Yeah.
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 Just curious, sharing that, you having this platform has sort of opened the door to having people, friends of friends, and this and that approach you. Have you also encountered the opposite where you have people that know you or know you through others and have been like, ugh,
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I remember, I'll never forget, I walked in to like my cousin's birthday party, I think it was like the most random thing. And I walk in, and like someone I knew from high school was like, well, just so you know, I would never send my kids to therapy. I'm like, okay,
Great.
I feel bad for your kids. Like, that's all I said. all right, literally never told you you should. Like, you don't even have kids. So it's just
My
like,
God.
yeah, like, so it's just sometimes you get those things. I get a lot of like, it's interesting, like during the pandemic, I would get a lot, sometimes some dads who would come up to, who knew me from cheerleader, different things, being like, you should really delete TikTok. Like, it's not good for people. I'm like, yeah, okay, thank you for the feedback. Like,
Right.
so you just get a lot of like unsolicited opinions.
Yeah. Like, I'm an adult. Thank you.
Yeah, I just smile. I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
But for a lot of like, that's easy, or you got on at the right time, like, so there's just been like also some of those like digs of like, um like you were talking about, like, it's not a lot of work. Oh,
Yeah.
how easy that you get to just make a video all day. And I'm like, oh, only if you saw like my pages of notes, making sure it's research based, and like
Yeah.
making or thinking through how is it going to come across and impact people. So,
Yeah.
but it's you're going to get that with everything you do. So
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, just in the last few minutes here,
yeah.
I would love for you if you could, me as an adult, I'm curious about your experience in relationship with social media, but I think if there's anything more to say about teens and social media and advice or thoughts, like I would love for you to take a few minutes with that, because I think it's terrifying for parents and it's overwhelming for kids, and there's like, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, we have to understand that social interactions have moved for teens. A lot of it has moved online. And so it's really hard because it's not like, but before, where you could see them interacting at school, you could overhear what they're saying. So I always encourage parents to be on social media, know who your teens are following, know if their account, make sure that their account is private. Um, Talk to them about like what is appropriate. I've had a lot of teens who are scared to ask their parents about stuff they saw on social media because they're scared their parents going to take the social media away. And so my point of thought process on this too is, I've parents all the time who come into my office and they get stuck in this cycle where they give their kid their phone on social media, then their kids' grades, they're not turning their homework or whatever they're doing, they take the phone away. The kids' grades do better. They give the phone back. They come down again. And we blame the teen, which of course they have control over their behavior. At the same time, it's like we need to teach them the skills to be able to not utilize that phone, because once they're an adult, and we know as adults, I struggle with my phone usage.
Yeah.
So a teen who they're constantly posting, not like us where you see your friends post every once in a while, constantly posting, constantly getting notifications, and that social pressure to have to be always on their phone. We have to teach them like phone hygiene, like
Mm.
sleep hygiene, how we take care of our body hygiene. Don't eat ice cream all day, every day. You're going to get sick. Same thing with phone usage. We have to teach them how to regulate their usage and how to recognize when they've been scrolling too long or when to take these breaks, because that's a lot more powerful than us just taking the phone away. When you can have conversations and give your teen as much control over when you talk about phone and social media, you're going to get a lot more out of it. Teens are more likely to follow through on consequences as well if they have a voice in what those consequences are. So I like to, when I bring a teen in, we do a social media like clean out. We just see who they're following, how it makes them feel. Always can go like creep on Kim Kardashian if you're not following Kim and
Right.
North. You don't have to, like, so it's like, how do people make you feel when you follow them? And really looking at what they're doing on social media, because that is more important than even how long they spend on it. It's what are they doing on it? Are they creating these dances? Because that's great. That's connection. Those are those things. Are they just scrolling? What are they looking at? Someone who might be struggling with depression, is their whole feed depression videos? That's not
Right.
going to be helpful. We know from research that the 3 hour mark, so if teens are on their phones for 3 hours or longer, they are more likely to self-report symptoms of anxiety and depression.
Mm.
So we're not saying that, there's not research to say like phone usage directly causes it, but what we're seeing is that teens themselves report higher rates of feeling anxious or feeling depressed in their phone if their phone usage time is above that 3 hour mark. So I would look
Mhm.
out for that. There's a lot of ways to help your kids. I would say like when they're younger and they want it, start with like, they can get Snapchat on your phone, right? So it's your account, but they can use it. So, and you're really, what you want to see is them being able to come to you with things that are happening, good things, bad things, all things.
Okay.
Then it moves into, they can have their own account, but they have to follow you or you have access to that account. Then it can move on to like that, they can have their own account, because teens they want that space, and they're going to make mistakes. They're going to make those like secret TikTok account that you know about, but it's all about like them feeling safe telling you things. I think this stat was like 7 in 10 or 9 in 10. A lot of people have felt cyberbullying.
Mm.
And when that video went viral of me, of someone like changing the words in my video, I was like, this is what it must feel like to be a teen. Because for me, that's a lot of views. When I talk to people in my real life, they're like, what? I don't even have TikTok. So they don't even know. But to me, it felt like everybody saw it.
Right.
And so for high schoolers or middle schoolers, when people are bullying them or like making fun of them on social media, or something happens where they share something, to them, it's their whole world. And I see a lot. I would definitely say, if your kid's on Snapchat, making sure that they friend you on Snapchat, because that's where I see like my middle schoolers impulsively posting photos of themselves crying, or like saying things. And then it's like that seeking reassurance or validation of like, I'm having a hard time. They want their friends to swipe up and be like, are you okay? Are you okay? So we have to like understand, how are they using social media, and how can we teach them, like, if you're struggling, you can ask your friends to FaceTime you instead of like posting this photo. But lots of curiosity, lots of questions. I think as parents, oftentimes people are quick to problem solve for their kid, right? You want to like fix any problem they face, because we're natural problem solvers. When you have a kid, you're doing a million things all day. So by trying to force them to learn how to problem solve, you're just going to teach them a lot more skills. So I would say, what do you think about that? If they're telling you a story about their friend who did something inappropriate and you're dying to say like, don't do that, and this is why that's wrong, instead being like, what do you think about that, and why do you think that could be an issue? You're going to get a lot more out of them, and you're going to help them build a lot more skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that, because it's
Yeah.
the main thing I was, aside from the actual context that we were talking about, like what just kept coming to me is how different like social media and phone use, it's like its own animal. There aren't many things in your kid's life that you're going to be able to treat the same way. Like
Yeah.
for me, I always, I'm always, I don't know, I'm on like a whole thing with food and body and this and that. And like, so there is part of me that was trying to equate it to that, in the sense of, hey, a cookie is a cookie, is a pear, is a grape. Like if we don't gatekeep the cookies, there's nothing special about them anymore.
Yeah,
But it's
exactly.
not quite the same with the
No.
phones and social, because of safety, because
Yeah.
of age appropriateness,
Yeah.
because of really just
You
not
had
great things that can happen.
control. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Control
Like,
their accounts.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
don't have control of what they're seeing. Exactly. Whereas,
Mhm.
like, I can control what's in my pantry.
Right. And
Even if I give them unlimited access to what's in the
yeah,
pantry, it's
you
only
notice,
going to go as far as the pantry. Right. Yeah.
you know cookies are gone. So it's a lot harder when it's a space that you're not in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I think social media can be a great place, and the more you can be, no, like the more your kid is sending you videos and trends, and you're connecting on that, the better. But
Yeah.
it is really hard. And every kid has different needs, so
I know.
there's no like blanket, this is what to do, which
Yeah.
I think is even harder.
Yeah.
uh, but I know and the other piece I would say is like parents together. Like if you're everyone being able to share with each other is really important too, or like understanding the boundaries everyone sets, because if Sally is telling her mom, oh, this happened to Jack, and then Sally's mom can let Jack know, that's going to be really helpful,
Hmm.
of like circle of trust, to be able to like have those eyes on accounts, because you can't do it by yourself.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't do it now as an adult
I
with
know.
my like one account. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So, and
Yeah.
the same TV, like before we'd watch Disney Channel, that was it. And now it's
Right.
like kids watch Netflix, a show gets recommended to them, they don't know that it's maybe
Yeah.
not age appropriate. So
Yeah.
there's a lot more to filter
Yeah.
nowadays for your kids than there used to be.
Yeah, totally. Totally. Okay. All right. Well, Lindsay, is there anything either about ADHD or your experience or social media, anything that is sort of lingering on your mind that you want to make sure to leave people with today before we wrap up?
I would say my last piece of advice or like thing I would want to say is to like invest in your mental health. I think a lot of people will listen to podcasts, they'll watch TikTok videos, and like we were just saying, like that's great to get kind of that interest in there, I get a little baseline learning. But I get so many people who come in and they're like, oh, you could be helping people who have it way worse than me, or oh, I don't even know why I'm here. And it's like, that's okay. The
Yeah.
sooner we can all learn from building skills. So you are worth investing in your mental health.
Boom. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. This was a good conversation.
Okay, what a great conversation. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for joining me. It's always cool when I can put a real person to the social media personality that I've been watching for a long time, and I so appreciated getting to know you better. There is so much to talk about from this conversation, and I think the first thing I want to talk about is how surprised I was to learn that as a child working with a therapist, Lindsay didn't have a great experience. And I think the point that I want to emphasize out of that is that, not everybody knows that you can be vocal about therapy, vocal in therapy about your needs, about your preferences. Therapy is a relationship, and it is important to be your own advocate. But when we're talking about our kids, teens, we can't always expect them to know how to do that or know that it's okay to do that unless we tell them. Unless we tell them that it's okay and we teach them how. I think it also is important to say that, again, therapy is a relationship. Not every therapist is the right fit for every person. It isn't just about showing up and saying the things. Everybody actually needs to feel comfortable, and there has to be trust. And I can't imagine how hard it would be as a child to be in that kind of dynamic and not feel safe and secure in the relationship. It's definitely something to think about if and when my kids want to go to therapy. I want to be mindful of how I can teach them to be their own advocate, or if they're still pretty young, just being mindful that I need to advocate for them. How can I make sure that this relationship is positive for them? It's a lot to think about. And I think ultimately it comes down to open, honest conversation around mental health in general. The more we normalize it, the better we can approach these conversations. And once again, as we often talk about on this show, the double-edged sword that is social media. Particularly when you combine social media with the conversation around mental health. I am obviously so happy that mental health is becoming more normalized to talk about on there. I am sitting here creating content that many of you very well might have found because of social media. And I discuss mental health all the time as a layperson who just believes in how important it is. But I do take that responsibility seriously. And I have seen how much misinformation is out there at times. And, like I said on the show, I've found myself wondering, like, do I have ADHD? Or am I just exhausted and like mom brain? Or am I overwhelmed, or is this some sort of trauma response? You can very easily start to self-diagnose and see yourself in everything that you're viewing on social media. So it's absolutely critical to understand your own mental health. It's equally critical to not jump to every conclusion under the sun because a viral video said something or other. It's equally important, there's so many important things, to know who you're following on social media and whether or not they are credible. And that's why I try to talk to as many experts as possible. It's also why I would never try to present myself as an expert. I'm just here, Christie, showing up and trying to help other women and moms do the same thing. Okay. And I can't end this conversation without talking about our middle school girls and really just taking a moment to note what a vulnerable time that is. In some ways, I still feel like a kid. In other ways, I am so disconnected from my middle school days, it's hard to even remember. But I think I particularly have a special interest in middle school girls because although I can't remember all the details, it was a very traumatic time for me. I was bullied a lot and it left a lot of scars. I blocked a lot out, and so whenever the topic of middle school girls comes up, I'm always super interested because I think I'm wondering if it's going to spark some memory for me or heal some wound in me that I maybe don't even remember I have. But the point of this is that, that was that was traumatic for me. And, we had, our form of communication was passing notes under lockers and, waiting until you got home to log on to AIM and LOL to see if your initials were still on a girl's profile. And then, you know what? You had to walk away from it. As in your face, I'll say mine, as in my face as it always felt, whether I was at home or at school, I definitely can appreciate the pressure, the added pressure, which I should say, of having the entire world at your fingertips. The trends, the influencers, your friends. Like, it can never be turned off. And I'm truly having a hard time with that because I know what that feels like as an adult to deal with. But trying to put myself back as a middle school girl and feeling like I could never turn it off, that is a lot. That's a lot. And, I've talked a lot about on the show how I have to actively work to remember that social media is curated. There is more going on than what we see. And again, how much harder would it be to do that as a teenager or a preteen girl? I mean, it makes a lot of sense why there's a lot of anxiety. But all that being said, I truly appreciated Lindsay's practical tips for how to be involved in our kids' social media lives. It's totally not realistic to say that we should take social media away. Technology is not going anywhere. But we can use some of these amazing strategies to try to make it safer, to show them that we are there for them, that we want to know what's going on. And of course, as it always does, comes down to modeling what a healthy relationship with social media looks like. So, yeah. As a mom of two littles, I always hear the phrase, like, just you wait, often directed at those teenage years. And right now I am caught up in the little kid world, which is, of course, both hard and rewarding. It's sometimes hard to think beyond that now and imagine what it's going to be like when they are facing potential cyberbullying and scary stuff online. And I just really wish I could protect them from it all. But I hope that both of my children always know that they are safe to come to me no matter what they encounter online as the time comes. And every conversation I have with someone like Lindsay is just hopefully in my mind one step closer to that being a reality. So thank you so much again, Lindsay. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you next time. Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of LuAnn Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.